we've read this before. Over the years, it's something that, you know, we read again and again. And each time it deepens or changes in the way we understand it. It's one of those texts that you'll never really understand. And that's why we keep reading it. Much of Dōgen is like that. And the interesting thing about the Genjōkōan is that, at least in Japan, it's the most popular of his writings. And many people are familiar with it. Should have closed the window a long time ago. One of the reasons I like to just read it, and there are many books of commentary, less in English, but of the Genjōkōan and of Dōgen as a whole, is that what I like to do is to read it with it gives you a sense of beginner's mind without any commentary, and just for each person to take it, you know, on their own, with your own wisdom. It invites you because it's poetic. It invites you to relate to it in your own way. So I wanted each of us to first relate to it, as, you know, to sit and let it settle in your mind as we read it. And then I'll read maybe a paragraph or a paragraph, and then we'll see how what comes up, and what we think, and what we feel about the verses. And you don't have to think or feel anything. My other question, though, is technically I have the copy that Jonathan sent, that he attached, or the link to, and I have it printed. I'm wondering if you have it printed, or whether I should put it on the screen, or Jonathan should put it on the screen.
I say, if you have the text in front of you, could you wave or something so I can see you? And if not, I'll put it on the screen. So I think most of the participants have the text.
Okay. You can also have it on your screen, even if it's not printed. It's easier for me to do it printed, but you can also just put it on your screen and you'll still see us and be able to, yeah. So the Genjōkōan, I think, was written about 5 years or so after Dōgen, or not long after Dōgen came back from China. And part of his big work called Shobogenzo. And in the first work that Dōgen wrote when he came back from China was, the Fukinzenji, which was encouraging Zazen and explaining the benefits of Zazen, of meditation for all people. And he sort of came back from China with a very strong commitment to Zazen practice as very fundamental to having an awakening. and having a deep light. At that time, when Dōgen went to China, he went disillusioned by the practice that was happening in Japan at the time. And he sought out what he thought would be real teachers in China, and he met a few. Especially in the text, Advice for the Cook, Genjōkōan, he recounts some of his meetings with those teachers in China. And it's quite nice to read. That's also a wonderful text. And so he, the Buddhism in Japan and in much of China was very ritualistic, and a lot of study and debate and philosophizing, but not as much emphasis on practice and on meditation. So when he came back, that was what he wanted to reintroduce, was the emphasis on sitting and on just sitting. And that's, kind of the approach of Soto Zen, which is, he's considered the founder of Japanese Soto. And Soto Zen is what's called the path of gradual awakening. And gradual awakening, meaning like it's slow and steady wins the race. You just keep at it. You let go of expectations. And over the lifetimes, or this lifetime, you might notice a shift. So here, one of the themes that does come up that we'll notice again and again is the wanting to let go of outer forms and wanting to let in a real deep practice. So that's kind of the background of this Genjōkōan, realizing the fundamental point, realizing like the main point of practice. What is the main point of practice? And it's refreshing to read something like this because often we think we're practicing and we think we know why. But that thinking we know why itself is an obstacle. Because then we have a really good idea, but somehow our life tends not to fit that idea. So then we start becoming disillusioned. But maybe the problem is not the practice. Maybe the problem is our ideas of practice. And so Dōgen is good and very helpful in helping us relax and question some of those ideas. And that's really the Zen way, is that great doubt. Why are you doing what you're doing? You know why. And is what you know a really good reason? Or is it a borrowed reason? Are you borrowing your reasons? You shouldn't borrow your reasons from somebody else. You should find your own. So let us read the first paragraph together of the Genjōkōan. As all things are Buddha nature, are Buddha Dharma. As all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, birth, and death. There are Buddhas and sentient beings. As the myriad things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth and death. The Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus, there are birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. Yet, in attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. So that's the opening of Genjōkōan. Kind of sets the tone. What we consider what sometimes one is called a non-dual approach. And yet here we see that Dōgen's understanding of non-dual is similar to, the Buddha's understanding of the middle way. So yesterday was the full moon. Last night was the full moon. And I think at Gilad House, they sat, I'm sure some of you probably joined the late night sitting. It's too late for me. So the full moon sitting, celebrating the Buddha's first teaching. And in that first teaching, the very first teaching of the first teaching, in that sutta, which is the turning of the wheel of Dharma, it's called. In that first teaching, is the teaching of the middle way. And he calls it the middle way. And so the Buddha Dharma is also known as the middle way. And the middle way, the Buddha explains it as avoiding extremes. And the two main extremes of attachment or eternalism or grasping or thinking that things are permanent and real. And the other extreme of nihilism or like denying everything and thinking it's not real. So the middle way is saying it's neither one nor the other. It's both and neither. It's not the middle in between them. Like in between birth and death, there's, I don't know, middle age? No. 45? No. It's that which includes both and is not defined by either. And this is what he's expressing here, is that really subtle yet universal view that goes and sees it all, but also takes care of the details, does not ignore the specifics. And that's a really, really enlightened view. An enlightened view doesn't just see emptiness. An enlightened view sees form and doesn't prefer one over the other. Doesn't prefer form or emptiness. The one extreme that the Buddha talked about, and when we read this first paragraph, you probably heard echoes of the Heart Sutra. Form and emptiness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, phenomena, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance and no end to ignorance, no old age and death and no end to old age and death. That's exactly what Dōgen is saying here. And in the same way that the Heart Sutra is sort of a summary of the teachings of that non-dual or the middle way. If you want to know what the Heart Sutra really is summarizing, it's summarizing that middle way that the Buddha taught in the very first teaching. That to avoid these extremes of saying, I'm caught up with form. Or I reject form and I'm just, it's all empty. It's not, doesn't have any substance. These are all just illusions. No, I'm sitting on a chair. How can I say that's an illusion? If I wake up and I have a headache, I'm going to say I don't have a headache, it's an illusion. No. Somebody gets a virus, I'm going to say, no, it's an illusion. Or it's impermanent, it'll pass. That's one extreme of emptiness. And this is where he says, all things are Buddha Dharma. So that's the big view of like you're starting with that enlightened view. And this is also a real important fundamental point for Dogen, to understand Dogen and to understand Soto Zen and to understand the Buddha way, according to Dogen's view, is to understand it that your starting point is Buddha Dharma, is Buddha nature, is seeing the world as a Buddha field, as an enlightened place. It's not something you arrive at. It's not your destination. It's your point of departure. That's really, that actualizing the fundamental point is realizing the truth of where you are now. Not as something, Loba Shamaimhi. It's like, this is our starting point, as all things are Buddha Dharma. Well, he starts his great work with that statement, which means, you're not going to get caught up with forms because it's Buddha Dharma, So they're there in order to realize the great truth of, harmony, unity, and emptiness. And yet you're not going to just be caught up in non-existence because the forms are Buddha Dharma. As all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization. Okay? Ignorance, no end to ignorance. No old age and death, and no end to old age and death. Realization, practice, birth, and death. There are Buddhas and sentient beings. Okay? So things are real, they're there, and they express Buddha Dharma. That's the beauty of form in the world. And that's why form is not something we reject. It's something we embrace, not for my own pleasure and benefit, which, is not to be rejected, my own pleasure and benefit. It's not for the sake of my pleasure and benefit. The form is for the sake of realizing that everything is Buddha Dharma. So then I can engage in form in a healthier way because I have the why. I have the what. I know what it's about. I know deeply on an intuitive level that all things are manifestation of Buddha Dharma, including delusion and realization. Delusion and realization are part of the Buddha Dharma. If there's no delusion, then there's no aspiration, there's no path. You see, delusion is part of the path. If there's no delusion and no dukkha, let's say, and it's delusion which leads to dukkha. Delusion is one of the three fires. There's, attachment, aversion, and ignorance or delusion. So there's delusion and there's realization. And they're, the warp and the woof, they are the sides of the same coin. They are the form and the emptiness. Delusion is form, emptiness is realization. But they exist in harmony like samsara and nirvana. Okay, they're one reality. But we necessarily experience them as two in order to pursue the path. This is, the middle way that Dogen and the Buddha are expressing. We don't deal with form and delusion just to get rid of it and say, bye-bye, now I'm just in realization and emptiness. Right? Dukkha is something we're going to be dealing with all of our lives, as well as delusion. Why? Because sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires or delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. They're inexhaustible. So you may deal with your crap, but you're still going to have to be dealing with everybody else's. And that's why delusion and realization are, soulmates. They're soulmates. Form and emptiness. Dukkha and liberation. Nirvana and samsara. The middle way means that they're entwined together and it's one path. So, no, there is delusion, realization, practice, birth and death, and there are Buddhas and sentient beings. Yeah? So it's true. In this place of form, there are people who are more realized than other people. There are people who are, more wise and living in a better, more beneficial, loving way. And there are people who are really seriously causing harm to themselves or to others. I'm not going to say that's a Buddha. Buddha potential, hidden Buddha. So there is that. There are Buddhas and sentient beings. Okay. And the myriad things are without an abiding self, as there is emptiness and selflessness. Then there is no delusion, realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth and death. Now, as one of the ancients said, when you meet the Buddha on the way, kill the Buddha. It's just simply expressing there that any idea you have is going to create division. And today in this world, we see that more than any other time in my life. The divisions that exist stronger and stronger each day among people. In Israel and America, around the world, the virus has brought it out. Social media is like giving it fuel. The divisions are extremely, extremely strong. And that's why we have this. There's no Buddha, there's no sentient beings. There's no birth and death. Meaning our ideas are seriously problematic. Our ideas are problematic. So that's why there's always this emphasis on no, on the negation in the Heart Sutra and in the Zen and in Mahayana. The emphasis on negation is that of trying to liberate us from the prison of our own ideas, and how those ideas often cause a lot of separation between ourselves and others. And that's why sometimes it's better to be kind than it is to be right. That's a basic metta. That's a basic metta proverb. It's better to be kind than right. Because right is, division. And kind is unity. So, that's the no sentient beings, no birth and death. The Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Not being caught up in these divisions. Like we see them, maybe they're useful, but I'm going to stand apart from it. In my mind, I'm going to stand apart. Maybe I'll deal with the world. Like last week at Gilad House, I was talking about the ox herding, the 10 ox herding pictures. And the last one is the circle where it comes back to the marketplace. And that's where, after enlightenment, full enlightenment, you got to deal with other people who are not enlightened. You got to deal well. And that's being kind, not right. So that's leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus, there are birth and death. So then we come back. There's that old Zen saying. Before I started to practice, I saw mountains were mountains and rivers are rivers. I was practicing for many years and I saw the emptiness. No mountains, no rivers. Mountains were not mountains, rivers were not rivers. Finally, after enlightenment, I saw the mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. And here we have the same in this one paragraph. Okay, things of Buddha Dharma, there's delusion, realization, practice, birth, and death. And because everything is empty of self, there's no realization, no practice, no death. Okay, no birth and death. That's the no mountains, no rivers. And then the Buddha way is basically, stepping back from all of that division, the division even of form and emptiness, the division even of enlightened and unenlightened. of Buddha and sentient beings. And then we come back, and thus there are birth and death, delusion, realization, sentient beings, and Buddhas. We come full circle. And then he gives us a little warning. So you feel like you've gone through the whole circle of practice. You know, I was into divisions. I was into form. I saw how much Buddha there was. And then I realized emptiness. And I saw it was all empty, and you know, the forms were a delusion. And then I realized the fullness of it, and I came back to appreciate the forms and the Buddhas and the sentient beings and birth and death. And I realized this is the place I need to work. Sounds great, but Dōgen is quite wise to remind us, even when you have a very elevated awareness, still watch out. And that's that little last line in this paragraph. That's the last line here where he says, yet. See, that's it kind of, whenever you say yet or but, is saying, be careful. In attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, the weeds spread. That you may feel really enlightened and have a real, you know, peace and love in your heart. And that is true. But our aversions and our attachments are deep-seated conditioning that sneak up and cause us when we feel stress. And dukkha, another translation of dukkha is not suffering, but a translation of dukkha is stress. And when you feel stress and pressure from a difficult situation, it's much easier to give in and be caught by those old patterns of aversion and attachment, of blame and gain. And that's why Dōgen reminds us, you know, yeah, you've gone full circle, that's great, congratulations. Watch out for your old attachments. They're going to trip you up, especially when you're feeling really, you know, good about yourself. I can only speak from experience. So the aversions and the attachments are there as a real important reality check. They are not signs of that you've failed. They're signs that you're living and facing your karma. And that means when you notice it, it's not a sign that you've failed. It's a sign that you're on the path. Because if you don't notice it and you just give into it, and you feel right about that reaction, that's total lack of awareness. But when you can make your difficult karma part of your path of awakening, and to notice and to realize, this is my karma. You know, these are my patterns. These are my patterns. They're not the world's patterns. The aversions and the attachments are not coming from the world. They're coming from my history. And when you notice them in your mind come up, especially when you're, you know, in a retreat place, that means you're on the path. Okay. And that's coming back to all things are Buddha Dharma. Goes back to his first 6 words. 5 words. All things are Buddha Dharma. Including your attachments and aversions. Yeah, they make that beautiful flower fall. Okay, and they spread the weeds of that karma. But it's your job to notice that. Okay. Especially when you've gone through a circle of practice. So we have a kind of whole summary of the way here in this first paragraph. One paragraph. Mm. Mm. So, anyone who's sitting here, we can continue a bit, but if you'd like to say something about this this section, I'd be happy to hear your comment.
Daniel? So I have a question about birth and death. That he says, I'm trying to connect it to something like some experience in practice in life. So I'm not sure.
Mm. Yeah. So, I mean, whenever we're talking about birth and death in Dharma teachings, there's, obviously the gross level of birth and death, like the physical birth and death, or birth and death of those we love and care about, birth and death of, our own lives, and the birth and death of things around us. Yeah, there's that. But birth and death is also a way of talking about impermanence and change. So when we're talking about birth and death, we're also talking about the birth and death of every moment and the passage of time, and the rising and passing of everything. So the birth and death of this day, of this time we have tonight, of my good feeling, of my nice thoughts, of my difficult thoughts, of my health, of my sickness, the birth and death of moment by moment life, and how I'm birthing my own thoughts, my own karma again, and parts of me are dying. So there's birth and death in practice in a moment by moment mindfulness and close attention to the passage of change and time in my life. So when you notice it as birth and death, you notice that I'm contributing to, in my either my wholesome thoughts or my unwholesome thoughts, I'm contributing to this cycle of rebirth. That certain thoughts are reborn, certain thoughts die, and then are reborn. They pass, they die, but then they're reborn because the strength of my karma keeps them going. What is my karma? That I've been doing actions and thoughts over and over again, so they become patterns that habitually arise. That's rebirth. You don't need to think physical, like mental rebirth. So there's birth and death in my mind as well, and in my practice. There's states that arise that are pleasant. There's states that arise that are unpleasant. They pass. They are renewed and reborn. So when we talk about birth and death, we want to talk about the arising and passing of all states. In that there's a rebirth there as well that I'm contributing to. And I'm giving it momentum and energy from my present choices. So there's birth and death, but it's not sort of impersonal and indifferent. It's a birth and death that I'm contributing to. It's really important to understand my role in that as well. It's not just happening to me. It's something that I am participating in. Birth and death is an active practice. Okay. Another way to call it is karma. It's the actions and thoughts and speech that I am reinforcing moment by moment, and that this moment dies and is reborn again and again. That's on an individual moment by moment karmic level. But then there's also like all the states around me, physical, mental, emotional. So when I'm looking about in my practice, we can look at meditation, even Zazen, as noticing that experience of birth and death. Okay. States arise, they remain, they pass. They're born, they mature, they die. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. Some are beneficial, some are harmful. So really keeping track of impermanence. Impermanence we usually think of in terms of, oh, passing, things passing. But impermanence is also things arising. That's the birth part of impermanence. You see, the birth part is that I give things birth. I bear things. I cause things to be reborn. I cause them because of my choices. That's rebirth and that's birth. They pass. They die. So notice that in your practice, that's what I recommend. If we're talking about these things as a practice, it's accepting that this cycle of birth and death is happening moment by moment. And then exploring that, investigating it. How is birth and death happening and occurring in my life moment by moment, in my day? And if I see it as part of this truth of reality, then when things do die, let's not talk about like big deaths right now, but like the moment by moment deaths, the disappointments, the changes, the passing of things that I like, the passing of things I don't like, the arising of things I like, the arising of things I don't like. Notice that, okay, as part of my awareness. And then see how it shifts your attitude slightly.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel, just a question of clarification. When he writes sleeping clear of the many and the one, if I understand correctly, the one is something like ultimate reality or enlightened mind or Buddha nature, and the many are the myriad phenomena that he speaks about. Okay.
Yeah. And also it's like what the Buddha is saying is pretty similar to the Buddha's first teaching of the middle way, leaping clear, not avoiding extremes, that it's, all one, and, there's the differences don't matter, and, we're all one. And then the many is, all the things I have aversion and attachment to. So yeah, I see this as a very close expression of the Buddha's middle way. So when you should go and read the first that first sutta, and his very first paragraph is describing a similar thing. So yeah.
Thank you.
And leaping clear is really interesting, because just to point that out, because we usually think, I want to leap clear of all the divisions and leap into the bliss of oneness. Or people want to leap into, the one thing that they want, that, object or goal that will make them happy. And that's leaping into the many. The specifics will make me happy. Or I want to transcend that. Just be free. You gotta leap clear of both of those. And when you can be unattached to both sides, then you can come back and appreciate both, and use them well. And still be careful for those attachments that sneak up. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. it's a helpful reminder. So I think this is enough for tonight. One paragraph. It's good to start. And as I said in the beginning, I want to remind us, the approach here is not one of intellectual grasping. It's helpful, and my explanations may help, but they may also just get in the way. And your thoughts may help, but in the end, you kind of just want to forget most of what we talked about and go back to read it tomorrow with a sense of a beginner's mind that, oh, I'm approaching it as it is, on its terms, not on my terms. And my understanding is very limited because it's, thoughts and ideas that are conditioned. So if you can appreciate the words, and then lead clear of them, which is what we'll do now by ending. So let's pause for a minute to take a couple of mindful breaths. Let all the talk and words fade. We have appreciation for the teachings of Dōgen, how they have been preserved, transmitted, translated, and brought to us tonight. Appreciate this opportunity to sit together and to practice the Buddha way, which is each of our way in your own way. And we internalize the vow, save all sentient beings, to put an end to delusions, enter the Dharma gates, and to realize our full Buddha nature.